What happens when one of Britain's most beloved actors walks into what should be a relaxed morning chat show, only to discover that the host is more interested in challenging his identity than discussing his career? In a matter of minutes, a seemingly harmless conversation about his latest project turns into a tense confrontation over his working class roots, and eventually pushes the legendary actor to the brink. The morning had begun like any other at the ITV studios. Michael Caine, the iconic actor known for his unmistakable Cockney voice and decades-long career, had agreed to appear on Lorraine Kelly's morning program to promote his latest film project. At 89, Caine had experienced almost everything the entertainment industry could offer. He had gone from humble beginnings in London's East End to becoming one of the most recognizable actors in cinema. He settled comfortably into the studio chair, expecting the usual friendly conversation. Lorraine Kelly greeted viewers with her familiar smile and enthusiastic introduction. "Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by the wonderful Michael Caine." Turning toward him, she continued, "You've had such an incredible career spanning more than 60 years. What keeps you motivated at this stage of your life?" Caine leaned forward, his expression warming as he answered, "Well, Lorraine, it's the same thing that's always motivated me. I come from very humble beginnings in South London, and I never forget where I came from. Every role I take is about telling stories that matter to ordinary people. That's what keeps me going." Kelly nodded, but her expression suggested she wasn't entirely satisfied. Yes. Your background is quite well documented, isn't it? The whole rags to riches story. But surely, with all your success, you must feel quite removed from those early days." The question immediately changed the atmosphere. Caine straightened slightly before responding. "I wouldn't say removed. If anything, success has made me more appreciative of where I started. When you've known real poverty and real struggle, you don't simply forget it. It shapes who you become." Kelly interrupted. "Oh, come on, Michael. Surely that's a little theatrical. You've been living in luxury for decades. Multi-million-pound homes, private jets, mixing with the elite. Don't you think clinging to this working-class image is a bit disingenuous?" The studio suddenly felt quieter. Caine's jaw tightened, but he remained composed. "I'm not clinging to anything, Lorraine. I'm simply being honest about my experiences. Success doesn't erase your past, and it shouldn't. Growing up poor, watching my mother struggle to put food on the table, that made me who I am." Kelly leaned back. "But don't you think your audience might find it a bit tiresome, this constant reference to your humble beginnings? How long can you really play that card?" The words hung heavily in the studio. Caine stared at her for a moment. "Play that card," he repeated slowly. Kelly continued, apparently unaware of how sharply the conversation had shifted. "Every interview you do, every appearance, it's always the same story. Poor boy from London makes good. Don't you think it's time to move beyond that narrative?" Caine remained silent for several seconds. Then his expression hardened. "Authenticity," he said quietly. "You want to talk about authenticity? Let me tell you about authenticity, Lorraine." He leaned forward. "Authenticity is remembering the woman who raised you when everyone else had given up." For the first time, Kelly's confident smile appeared to disappear. Caine continued, his voice steady but carrying the weight of nearly 9 decades of life experience. "Authenticity is remembering where you came from, no matter how successful you become. It's knowing that the people who struggled alongside you are part of your story. You don't erase them because your circumstances changed." The atmosphere inside the studio had completely transformed. What began as a cheerful promotional interview had become something far more personal. And everyone watching could sense that the conversation was no longer about a film. It was about respect, identity, and whether success gives anyone the right to dismiss the struggle that came before it. Authenticity is never forgetting the people who believed in you when you had nothing. It means staying true to your values, even when you're sitting in a television studio being told that your life story is tiresome. The words hung heavily in the studio. Lorraine Kelly's smile faltered for a brief moment, but she quickly recovered. Rather than reconsidering her approach, she pushed forward. "Oh, I'm not saying your story isn't inspiring, Michael," she replied. "I'm simply suggesting that perhaps viewers would enjoy hearing more about your current lifestyle and recent successes instead of dwelling on the past. After all, that was a very long time ago. A very long time ago. Caine repeated. His voice dropped into the unmistakable gravelly tone audiences had heard in countless films. The simple repetition seemed to change the atmosphere immediately. For the first time, Kelly appeared to understand that she might have crossed a line. But instead of backing away, she doubled down. Well, yes, she said, adjusting herself in her chair. You're a successful actor now. You've been knighted. You've won Oscars. You have homes around the world. Surely those early struggles are ancient history at this point. Caine's hands, which had been resting calmly on the arms of his chair, slowly curled into fists. It wasn't an explosive gesture. There was no shouting or dramatic movement. It was simply the controlled tension of someone who had spent an entire lifetime remembering exactly where he came from. Ancient history, he said quietly. Then he looked directly at Kelly. Is that what you call the experiences that shaped a human being? Kelly gave a patronizing laugh. No, don't get defensive. I'm simply trying to give you an opportunity to talk about your current projects and your current life. Our viewers are more interested in the glamorous Michael Caine of today than stories from decades ago. The phrase landed badly. Several crew members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Even people working behind the cameras could sense that the interview had gone somewhere nobody had expected. Yet Kelly continued. She sat confidently beneath the studio lights, apparently unaware of how dismissive her comments sounded. Caine, meanwhile, remained remarkably composed. For a long moment he said nothing. His piercing eyes remained fixed on Kelly, almost as though he were seeing her differently for the first time. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had earned every word. Stories, he said slowly. You think the story of a woman working 3 jobs to keep her children fed is just a story. Kelly's expression changed. Caine continued. You think the story of a young man leaving school at 15 to help support his family is something that should simply be forgotten because he eventually became successful. Michael, please don't twist my words, Kelly interrupted. There was now a nervous edge in her voice. But Caine didn't raise his voice. I'm not twisting anything. I'm repeating what you said. He paused. You called the experiences that made me who I am old stories. You suggested that my connection to my past was disingenuous, and you implied that being successful means I should stop talking about where I came from. Kelly shifted uncomfortably. The confidence she had displayed earlier was beginning to disappear. For years, she had interviewed celebrities who arrived on morning television ready to promote a film, album, book, or business. Most guests understood the unwritten rules: smile for the cameras, answer the questions, keep things light, move on to the next topic. But Caine wasn't playing along. He wasn't interested in pretending that his past was something embarrassing simply because his circumstances had changed. Kelly seemed to realize that she had seriously misjudged him. Yet instead of apologizing, she attempted one final strategy: minimize the confrontation. Look, I think you're being a bit oversensitive here, she said. This is morning television, Michael. We're supposed to be having a light, fun conversation. You're making this far too serious. Caine slowly turned toward her. Oversensitive, he repeated. There was a long silence. And in that moment, the interview stopped feeling like a promotional appearance. It became a confrontation over something much deeper. Whether success should ever require someone to apologize for the struggle that made them who they are. Oversensitive, Michael Caine repeated. There was something dangerous in the quiet way he said the word. He wasn't shouting, but the controlled intensity in his voice made the entire studio pay attention. Let me ask you something, Lorraine. Have you ever gone to bed hungry? Have you ever watched your mother cry because she couldn't afford proper shoes for her children? Have you ever been looked down upon simply because of the way you spoke or because of where you came from? Kelly opened her mouth, then closed it again. For once, she had no immediate response. Caine continued. Have you ever had someone decide you were worthless before you even had the chance to prove yourself? The questions landed heavily. Kelly's confidence had almost completely disappeared. She had tried to frame Caine's memories as unnecessary negativity, but now she was being forced to confront what those memories actually represented. Well, that's not really the point, she stammered. The point is that you overcame all of that. You're successful now. Why dwell on the negative? Caine leaned forward, never taking his eyes off her. Because it isn't negative, Lorraine. His voice remained calm. Those experiences taught me empathy. They taught me humility. They taught me the value of hard work and genuine human connection. They taught me that success means very little if you forget the people who helped you reach it. He paused. But I suppose someone who has never had to struggle would have difficulty understanding that. The remark hit hard. Kelly's face flushed, and the professional smile she had maintained throughout the interview finally disappeared. "That's completely uncalled for," she snapped. "You don't know anything about my life or what I've been through." "You're absolutely right," Caine replied. His voice returned to its normal volume, but the intensity remained. "I don't know your life. But I know what you've shown me in the last few minutes." He paused before continuing. "I know that you think talking about poverty is somehow embarrassing. I know that you question my authenticity simply because I refuse to hide my past. And I know that you seem to believe success should make a person distance themselves from where they came from." Kelly tried to interrupt. Caine raised one hand. He wasn't finished. "And most importantly, I know that you believe you can sit comfortably in that chair and dismiss experiences that shaped not only me, but millions of working class people who have spent their entire lives fighting for opportunities that others take for granted." The studio fell completely silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the cameras. Even the director appeared uncertain. Should they cut to another segment? Should they intervene? Or should they simply allow the conversation to continue? Kelly glanced around the studio, seemingly hoping someone would rescue her from the situation. Nobody did. She had created the confrontation herself, and now she had to face it. "I think we should move on to talking about your new film," she said. Her voice had changed completely. The confidence was gone, replaced by desperation. She shuffled through her notes with visibly nervous hands, searching for a way to recover the interview. But Caine wasn't ready to let the issue disappear. "No." The single word stopped her. "We're not moving on because this is exactly the problem, isn't it?" He sat back slightly. "When someone challenges your comfortable worldview, you want to brush it aside and change the subject. But that isn't how real conversations work, Lorraine. And it certainly isn't how real life works." Kelly's professional composure cracked even further. "Michael, I really think you're blowing this out of proportion," she replied. "I was simply trying to conduct an interview about your current projects. You're the one who has turned this into some kind of lecture about class warfare." The phrase hung in the air. Class warfare. Caine stared at her for several seconds. When he finally responded, his voice contained something more powerful than angered disappointment. "Class warfare," he repeated slowly. "Is that what you call it when someone refuses to be ashamed of where they came from?" Kelly remained silent. "Is that what you call it when someone says working class experiences have value?" "That's not what I said," she protested. But there was little conviction behind the words. Caine slowly pushed his chair back from the table separating them. The movement was subtle, yet everyone in the studio understood what it meant. He looked at Kelly one final time. "You know what the real tragedy is here, Lorraine." He paused. "It's not that you don't understand where I came from." His expression hardened. "It's that you don't want to understand." The studio remained frozen, and for the first time that morning, the interview no longer looked like television entertainment. It looked like a confrontation that neither of them could simply edit away. "You've built your entire career on talking to people, on supposedly connecting with your audience, but you have no interest in actually listening to what anyone has to say." The studio remained silent. Kelly immediately pushed back. "That's simply not true. I listen to all my guests. I've interviewed thousands of people over the years." Caine tilted his head slightly. "Have you?" The question was simple, but it carried enormous weight. "Or have you simply waited for them to finish speaking so you can ask your next prepared question?" Because there's a difference, you know. There's a difference between hearing words and actually listening to what someone is telling you about their life, their experiences, and their values. Kelly opened her mouth to respond. Nothing came out. There was no clever comeback, no confident television smile, no rehearsed response that could immediately repair the situation. Her own behavior had exposed the problem. Every dismissive remark, every interruption, and every attempt to minimize Caine's experiences had revealed more than any direct accusation could have. Caine continued, I've spent my entire career trying to tell stories that matter. Stories about real people facing real challenges. Stories about the dignity of ordinary working people. Stories about remembering where you come from and never losing sight of what truly matters. His voice grew stronger, and you sit there and describe those stories as tiresome tales from ancient history. The cameras continued rolling. Kelly glanced around the studio, almost as though she were searching for an escape. But there was nowhere to hide. The confrontation had become impossible to control. Perhaps we could take a short break, she suggested weakly. But Caine was already standing. The movement was slow and deliberate. He reached toward his jacket and carefully removed the microphone clip to his clothing. There's no need for a break, he said. I think I've said everything that needs to be said. He placed the microphone on the table. It was a small gesture, but everyone understood what it meant. The interview was over. Kelly stared at him in disbelief. Michael, please, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Let's just finish the interview. We can talk about your film, your upcoming projects. Please don't leave like this. Caine stopped near the edge of the interview area. For a moment, he simply stood there. Then he turned around. His anger seemed to have disappeared. What remained was something quieter and, somehow, more powerful. You still don't understand, do you? Kelly said nothing. This was never really about the interview. It wasn't about my film or my projects. It was about basic human respect. He continued. It was about treating people's experiences, their struggles, and their triumphs with the dignity they deserve. The studio remained completely still. Caine took a step forward. I've worked with some of the greatest directors, actors, and artists of my generation. I've met presidents and prime ministers, kings and queens. And do you know what I've learned? He paused. The most interesting people are often the ones who remember their struggles. The most valuable people are the ones who honor their past. And the most authentic people never forget where they came from. Kelly stared back at him. But you seem to believe that success means leaving all of that behind. His words were no longer angry. They sounded disappointed. And that's something I simply cannot understand. He straightened his jacket and turned toward the studio exit. His footsteps echoed through the silent production area. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted him. Everyone watched as one of Britain's most recognizable actors chose to walk away rather than remain in a conversation where he felt his history and identity were being dismissed. As he reached the studio door, Caine paused. He didn't turn around. Good luck with the rest of your show, Lorraine. His voice was calm. Then came one final sentence. I hope someday you learn the difference between entertainment and exploitation. And with that, Michael Caine walked out. The cameras continued recording. Kelly remained seated, staring toward the door he had just disappeared through. The confident host who had begun the interview with a bright smile was now left facing the consequences of a conversation she had failed to control. The entire confrontation had begun with a seemingly casual dismissal of his working-class roots. But what followed was far bigger than a disagreement between a television host and a celebrity. It became a debate about class, identity, success, memory, and respect. And in the end, Caine made his choice. He chose dignity over publicity. He chose authenticity over convenience. And he chose to walk away rather than allow anyone to convince him that his past was something he should be ashamed of.